Namaskar. In the last lecture, we talked about soul in Jain philosophy. Today, we shall know about the concepts of soul in other philosophies. This will also make you appreciate the merits and strength of the ideas in Jain philosophy. We start with Indian philosophies. All Indian philosophies, mainly 6 of them, describe soul. They accept soul and describe in different manner. Say for example, Sankhya Yoga system accepts each individual soul, which is called Purush in this system, endowed with beginningless and endless inherent consciousness. So this system accepts now that the soul has inherent consciousness and it's beginningless and endless. Its reality of consciousness is unchangeable, permanent, eternal, and all-pervading, and infinite souls like Jain philosophy. So they also accept that there are infinite souls in the universe. But it does not admit soul's capacity of contraction and expansion, and that the soul is doer and enjoyer. So these are the points of differences. In Jain philosophy, we know the soul can contract and expand according to the size of the body, and the soul is doer and enjoyer. Whatever activities it is doing, it has to face the consequences of those activities sometime in future. So that idea is also not accepted in Sankhya Yoga system. Therefore, no spirit is bound or liberated. In the absence of such concept, there is no question of soul being bound and being liberated. Nor does any migrate. The soul does not migrate from one body to another. It is the nature of Prakriti, which is the material part of existence, abiding in manifold forms, and that migrates or is bound or liberated. So it's not the soul which is a non-material part, it is the material part of nature that goes from one body to another, and that also gets liberated. In the Nyaya Vaisheshika system, it also conceives beginningless and endless infinite soul substance as distinct by the difference of body. So it also accepts that soul is beginningless and endless and it is different from body, but does not accept soul as intermediate dimensions like Jain metaphysics. So they also do not accept that the soul contracts and expands according to the size of the body. This system admits it as all pervasive, just like Sankhya Yoga system. It does not admit inseparable, inherent, eternal capacities like consciousness in the soul. So consciousness then is not an attribute of soul in this system. Nevertheless, it accepts knowledge, bliss, pain, desire, hatred, effort, merit and demerit, etc. as the qualities of soul. So in place of consciousness, these attributes are supposed to be the qualities of the soul. It conceives soul as endowed with qualities like intelligence in the physical state. When the soul is embodied, then it has intelligence. Nyaya Vaisheshika admits doer and enjoyer concept. So they believe, yes, soul is doer and enjoys the fruits of its actions in the physical body. That is, when the soul is in the physical body. When there is inherence of qualities like knowledge, desire, effort, etc. So in the embodied state also there are properties like knowledge, desire, efforts, but not in the liberated state. Once the soul is liberated, these qualities are supposed to be absent. According to this system, the meaning of rebirth is not the change of place of the soul like Jaina system, but change of place of mind. So when there is a rebirth, that is one body after another, then they say that it is not the soul which is going from one place to another, it is the mind which is going from one place to another, or from one body to another body. So that makes a lot of difference, or a considerable difference between this system and the Jain system. Then we talk something about what the Upanishads say about soul. Sankara is well known, or Acharya of this tradition, Upanishad, assuming that there is no real existence except Brahma. So Sankara says the only thing real in the world is Brahma and nothing else, and explains the multiplicity of the individual souls as they experience in practical life in terms of illusion. So in the individual life, when you talk of soul, the Sankara says that, look here, this soul is just an illusion, In fact, it is he says that it is a part of Brahma. Brahma is real. The individual soul is an illusion. Hence, the mutual distinction between soul and Brahma is not real. So he says that this soul is not separate from Brahma. It's a part of Brahma. And if you say that it is a separate soul, it is only an illusion. Madhvacharya of the same tradition maintained by all means an opposite view in regard to soul by asserting that it is not imaginary but it is real. So Madhvacharya is another guru, from the same tradition as Sankara, but now he says that, look here, the soul has real existence, and it is also distinct from the Brahma, and it is also not part of the Brahma, it is distinct from Brahma. So he holds altogether a different concept or different idea. He believed in the doctrine of infinite eternal souls. So he also says that yes, there are infinite eternal souls in the universe. In Upanishads, Brahma, particularly Acharya Sankara, Brahma is described as incomprehensible in terms of knowledge. So Brahma is an entity, which cannot be comprehended by knowledge or by intellect. It is beyond the reach of intellect. This is called Agyeva. You cannot know about Brahma. The doctrine of incomprehensibility. So Brahma cannot be comprehended. It has a resemblance with the attributes credited to liberated soul of Jain philosophy. As we described the liberated soul in Jain philosophy, more or less on similar lines, the Brahma is described in Upanishad. In the Acharang Sutra, delineating the nature of the liberated soul, it is said all the articulations fail to describe it. So in Jain system also it is said that you cannot describe a liberated soul. It is inexpressible, it is indescribable. The same thing which the Upanishad is telling about Brahma. Similar is the expression in the Upanishad. Brahma or Atma are beyond the reach of mind and speech. Your mind and speech cannot comprehend Brahma. When the Acharanga Sutra calls it Agye, it implies that the soul is beyond the power of words to express. Words cannot express what is a liberated soul. It is neither comprehensible through logic nor it could be reached through intellect. So our intellect is not in a position to comprehend the reality of a liberated soul. We talk of something about Buddhism. Lord Buddha denied permanence of any entity or substance. So according to him, no substance or entity is really permanent. It's everything is continuously changing. According to Pali Pitaka, soul is like a momentary combination of mutually undivided feelings, ideas, volitions, and other faculties, and pure sensation of general consciousness. So his idea about soul is that it arises from the feelings, the ideas, the volitions, and other faculties of the consciousness which we have, that the soul comes in existence. But its existence is again momentary. So soul, you have a soul now, and next moment you don't have, again you will have it, and so on. So the soul is not a permanent entity, but it is only a momentary existence. And it is due to these attributes which we have just now talked. There is no soul apart from feelings, ideas, volitions, etc. He says that it is only these attributes which give rise to soul, and there is no soul except or apart from these kinds of emotions. But on the other side, there were 4 groups of Buddhist order and many advocates of the doctrine of eternal soul. So, but there are in the same tradition, there are other acharyas or other scholars who admit the existence of eternal soul. For example, Nagarjuna established Sunyavad, the doctrine of essencelessness or voidness of all appearances. So according to him, everything is null and void, Sunyavad. Yogacharya school at last established soul in the philosophy of Vijnanavad. So this Yogacharya school is one sect of Buddhism. They finally accepted, yes, there is soul. So this is about the Indian traditions. We shall now talk something about what is the concept of soul in Western thought or Western tradition. Starting with Plato. Plato, drawing on the words of his teacher Socrates, considered soul as the essence of a person, being that which decides how we behave. So Plato accepts the existence of a soul, it's the essence of our being, and the soul is the cause of our behavior, and that decides how we behave. The soul decides how we behave. He considered this essence to be an incorporeal, eternal occupant of our being. So he thinks that this essence or soul, which we can call it, is incorporeal, there is immaterial, it's the eternal occupant of our being. As bodies die, soul is continuously reborn in subsequent bodies, a concept very similar to Jain concept. So he says that the soul does not die, it is the body which dies. Aristotle defined the soul or psyche as the essence or definition of a living being. So Aristotle also accepts that the soul is the essence of a living being, but argued against its having a separate existence from the physical body. But he says that okay, it is, the soul is there, but it is not separate from the body. Although there is a body and soul, there are two things, but then both are same, he says. In Aristotle's view, the primary activity of a living being constitutes its soul, So when there are activities in the body, those activities constitute the soul, and soul is not a separate thing. For example, the soul of an eye, if it were an independent organism, would be seeing. Soul is as the soul of eye. There is nothing like soul of an eye, If it were independent, then it would be seeing independent of the body. But that's not so. Then Saint Thomas Aquinas, he understood soul to be the first principle or act of the body. So he is again relating soul to body. Soul had an operation separate from the body and therefore could subsist without the body. So he thinks that the soul can exist without the body also. Immanuel Kant identified the soul as I in the strictest sense. We normally talk of I do this, I will do this, I got it. What is I? So the Kant says that this I which you are referring in your conversation is the soul. We cannot prove a priori the immateriality of the soul. Although it is immaterial, but he says it cannot be proven, but rather only so much that all properties and actions of the soul cannot be cognized from materiality. But he says that although we cannot prove the soul to be immaterial, but at the same time, no material process can really identify soul or its actions. So he accepts that it is immaterial, but it cannot be proven. Judaism says that soul is believed to be given by God to a person by his or her first breath, as mentioned in Genesis. So Judaism believes that the God gives the breath to a person, and through that he gives the soul to a person. Christianity, the Old Testament contains the statements, "Then shall the dust return to earth as it was, and the spirit shall return into God who gave it." The idea here is this, that the body is developed, and then the God gives soul into the body, and the Lord God formed man, the dust of the ground. So body is formed by dust of the ground, and then God breathed into his nostril the breath of life. So the God breathes into the nostril of the body, and the body comes to life, and the soul is there in the body, and man became a living soul. So there is a soul in the body, which has been given by God. And then when the death occurs, it says that the body shall return to earth, because it was produced from earth, or that is earth's components, and the spirit, the soul, will return to God who gave it. Most Christians understand the soul as an ontological reality distinct from yet integrally connected with the body. So although soul is different from the body, but it is connected to body. Its characteristics are described in moral, spiritual and philosophical terms. So how the soul is different from body is because of these characteristics of moral, spiritual and philosophical aspects. So in this respect, the soul is different from the body. When people die, their soul will be judged by God and determined to spend an eternity in heaven or hell. So when a person dies, the soul will go either to heaven or hell depending upon his actions, activities, and this judgment is made by God. So the God will send the soul either to heaven if he has done good activities or to hell if he has done bad activities. Roman Catholic beliefs, the present catechism of the Catholic Church denies the soul as the innermost aspect of humans, that which is of greatest value in them, that by which they are most especially in God's image. Soul signifies the spiritual principle in man. All souls, having living and dead, will be judged by Jesus Christ when he comes back to earth. So this is a belief, that Jesus Christ will come back to earth someday, and then at that time he will pass a judgment where the soul will go, whether to heaven or hell. So the judgment will be passed by Jesus Christ on his return to earth. The Catholic Church teaches that the existence of each individual soul is dependent wholly upon God. So the God gives the soul. The doctrine of the faith affirms that the spiritual and immortal soul is created immediately by God. So the God creates the soul, and that soul has spiritual and moral aspects. Protestants generally believe in the soul's existence, but fall into two major camps about what this means in terms of an afterlife. Some believe in the immortality of the soul and conscious experience after death. So that means there is a rebirth, this is accepted. While others believe in the mortality of the soul, and conscious sleep until the resurrection of the dead. So they do not believe in rebirth, and there will be a judgment passed by Jesus Christ when he comes back to earth. Islam. There is a hadith reported in Abdullah Masud in which it is stated that the soul is put into the human embryo 40 days after fertilization takes place. So there is a process of fertilization in human beings and other beings which are born of womb, but 40 days after the fertilization takes place, the soul is put into that embryo by Allah. According to the Quran, ruh or soul is command from Allah. So Allah is the authority who gives ruh to human beings. Then we talk something about the materialistic approach of consciousness. The materialistic approach is adapted by scientists. They are materialistic, and they do not talk of soul, but they are only worried about to explain what is consciousness. The body is there, but we are conscious of many things. So how this consciousness arises in the body, that is the main concern of scientists. They want to explain this, that is the subjective behavior, the consciousness. These things are although distinct from the body, but generate from the body. That is their main, because they do not accept any other entity except body. The soul is not accepted. And there is a strong belief that the consciousness arises from processes taking place in the brain. The neurological processes which are taking place in the brain gives rise to consciousness, and that has a subjective kind of behavior or subjective kind of feeling. So now, because they have studied the neurological processes in the brain in great detail, and as time passes, they are able to reveal finer part of these processes, and then they find that because these processes are very uncertain type, you cannot predict or cannot make definite predictions of these processes. So they have tried to correlate the neural processes to quantum processes. Quantum processes in physics, also involve an amount of uncertainty in the behavior of the particles at that very small scale or at very final level. So then earlier the scientists used to say that look here, the classical mechanics can explain the neural processes, because at that time probably they were not aware of the finer part of this process. But as the time advanced, we discovered a finer components of these processes, and then the thought has come that it could be quantum processes. Quantum consciousness hypothesis proposes that classical mechanism cannot explain consciousness. The apparently chaotic or quantum behavior associated with neural network cannot be accommodated by classical physics, while quantum mechanical phenomena such as quantum entanglement and superposition may play an important part in the brain's functions and could form the basis of an explanation of consciousness. So this is what many scientists believe, that it could be a conscious and a quantum phenomena that gives rise to consciousness. But there are people who have a different kind of opinion. For example, Sir Karl Popper describes that the mind and brain exist in two separate realities. He does not accept this hypothesis that the brain processes give rise to mind or soul. So he said these two are different things. The brain is a functioning material organ of the body, and the mind or consciousness is the immaterial symptom of the living entity. So mind is immaterial, soul is immaterial, which motivates the body. It seems that the ingredients of physics, biology, both of classical and quantum physics, and of the present science of information are not sufficient for the study of the brain mind. So he thinks that the present day knowledge of physics and biology probably cannot explain or is not in a position to study mind, which is very different from brain. So he distinguishes between mind and brain and rejects the idea that the brain processes gives rise to mind or consciousness. David Chalmers argues that there is no particular reason why particular macroscopic physical features in the brain or a particular quantum features such as the electromagnetic field in the brain should give rise to consciousness. I mean, he is not convinced, that these phenomena can give rise to consciousness. He is not convinced, So he does not accept those hypotheses. Bernard Bass a neurobiologist, wrote, "No serious researcher I know believes in an electromagnetic theory of consciousness. It is not really worth talking about scientifically." He said this is nonsense, So the electromagnetic theory of consciousness is just not to be talked of, when regarding the existence of consciousness, So he rejects altogether such attempts made by scientists. No theory of brain can explain why and how consciousness is a fundamental property of matter. Scientists are arguing in favor of this, that look here, it is the properties of the neural behavior that gives rise to consciousness. But no theory can explain how consciousness is a fundamental property of matter. It's not a property of matter at all. And so no theory can explain this, that it is a property of matter, And this is what Jainism has been saying all along, that consciousness is not a property of matter, it's a property of soul. Existence of consciousness is separate from the physical properties of matter. The main problem is the lack of an empirical test for consciousness. This is the problem, There is no test by which you can say that there is a consciousness or there is no consciousness. We cannot know whether a being is conscious or not, We cannot test it in the laboratory, We cannot measure consciousness. This is another problem. Neither you can test it, nor you can measure consciousness. This is the problem, and this probably is the reason that scientists are not believing in the existence of soul. So, the observations now on these various views, which we have coming from Western philosophy and scientists. The notion of soul has less explanatory power in a Western worldview, which prefers the empirical explanation involving observable and locatable elements of the brain. So most people, not all, so most Western philosophers and scientists, are in favor of consciousness arising from brain processes. Materialists hold that mind is the brain and the conscious mental activity is identical to neural activity. When the brain activity ceases, so do all conscious experience, and there is no immortality. So the brain is everything, and the brain activity gives rise to consciousness. The moment these activities stop, there is no consciousness, and therefore there is no question of immortality. So the whole thing is mortal, it dies. However, if we are entirely physical beings, this is a big question, then must not all the brain activity and behavior in question be determined by the laws of nature? Suppose we have known all the laws of nature, and if you think that, our subjectivity and consciousness is a material entity, then we should be able to explain with the help of these laws the behavior of a human being or behavior of any other being, his emotions, his subjectivity and so on. But this is not possible. No laws can really explain the subjective nature of behavior. The Jain philosophy presents soul as a natural substance without involving any superpower like God. So Jain's philosophy, now here I want to emphasize the merits of Jain philosophy. Number one, the Jain philosophy does not need any God to explain or justify the presence of consciousness or soul, And now here in this system, the soul is a separate substance which is eternal, immortal, and therefore it is present all the time, always. and it's a natural substance and has the properties of consciousness. So the consciousness has not to be explained by any other means, it's a property of the soul. So, and then the soul is a doer and enjoyer, So there is a cause and effect relationship which applies to soul, and which is the basic principle used by science to explain the behavior of material order. The same law, the same logic is applied to soul, and the soul is doer and enjoyer. So that way the concept of soul in Jain philosophy is really very scientific, You have a substance, which has a consciousness, and the substance then has a property. And we don't take help of any other external substance to explain the behavior of the soul, even not God. And it is a self-explanatory by its own laws. So that way Jain philosophy must be said or accepted to be very scientific. Thank you.